think you really have to understand, to your point, emotional intelligence, what makes your clients tick, especially if you're in the service profession, where you have to understand the nuances of how they work because sometimes it's not about being helpful, it's about being understanding and knowing that being overly helpful actually works against you.
Welcome to the Sales Gravy Podcast. I'm Jeb Blount Jr., filling in for Jeb Blount Sr., and today we have an amazing guest. I'm really excited for this conversation, something a little bit different than we've done through our entire series, and he's got insights that I can't wait for you to hear. But before we get going, go check out Sales Gravy University. Sales Gravy University is the most powerful sales training platform on the market for sales professionals and sales teams anywhere. It's the place where you have access to live training every week of every month of every year on topics that range from prospecting all the way through closing and negotiating, and even master classes around management and sales leadership. You have access to 1,000+ hours of on-demand sales training from 45+ of the world's leading experts in sales. It's the only place where you're going to find this content. So go to Sales Gravy University. That's learn.salesgravy.com, learn.salesgravy.com. And if you want to take a free class, use the code podcast at checkout. That's code podcast at checkout, learn.salesgravy.com. And we've got Justin Goldstein with us today. And he is the founder and lead strategist at PR73 out of New York City. And has some amazing insights. Justin, thank you so much for joining us on the Sales Gravy Podcast. Give us a little bit of your background, and then I have some questions that I need you to answer today.
Thanks so much for having me, Jeb. And yeah, I've been in public relations and marketing and communications for close to 15 years now, which is pretty insane to say. But started off at, sort of a smaller venture, went to work for a large PR firm, and then started PR73, which is formerly Press Record Communications, where we focus on driving public relations and biz dev and marketing solutions for organizations large and small.
And you work with founders, leaders, business owners, business strategists who are trying to promote their brand, trying to promote their credibility, trying to really develop their system for winning. That is not just direct sales or traditional digital marketing routes and through PR, and PR has been around forever. For as long as there's been a human who needs public relations, but the art has changed so much. And when you work with customers or prospects who want to work with you, you have an interesting insight into like systems versus just buying a placement. And I want you to expand on the theory why you ask your customers a very specific question when they come to work with you, because I think that it would provide a lot of insight for sales professionals in all industries and pretty much everywhere you go.
Yeah, 100%. I tell all of our clients and prospective clients that if you don't have a system in place to leverage the work of any public relations or marketing campaign, you're going to feel as though the campaign is falling flat. And that's because, especially on the PR side, when you're talking about something like media relations, where we focus a lot here on earned media relations, which means that we're not going to magazines, for example, and paying and guaranteeing placement for our clients. We're going to reporters to persuade them to talk to our clients on different topics. And so what often happens is that when clients try to factor in PR, let's say, or their business development efforts, what they expect is that if they get into the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, let's say, that their phone's going to be ringing off the hook the next day or same day, and 20 people are going to be calling them for their services. And in reality, it often doesn't work that way. It's more so what I call thinking past the placement and being able to leverage the work that we're doing proactively on your own channels to generate interest, which I'm sure we'll get into in a little bit.
Yeah, and you had another conversation with a customer of yours that I thought was insightful into this very specific challenge, right? So you use your placements proactively late after it's been on air, after it's been the Wall Street Journal, after it's been on whatever platform it's been on, and you use it for prospecting efforts. And that's a really maybe not novel idea, but it was novel to me, and I'd love to explore that a little bit more. So can you provide some insights into how you do it, or how you help your customers do this, and what channels you use to bring in more customers to your business?
Absolutely. I think often what happens with any sales professional, whether they're in sales or sales is a big part of their business, is that there's two main challenges to getting to the point of conversion, which of course are top and middle of funnel, right? So getting people, of course, into your funnel and then continuing the conversation. So where something like media placements where public relations comes into play with that from a top of funnel perspective is that it helps to build that brand equity and brand visibility and trust with the prospect to be able to have them come to you and potentially hire you for your services. Where it's also really valuable is when you get to the middle of funnel and you feel like those conversations are stalling out, maybe the conversation is going longer than you would have liked, and you're kind of running out of things to say or ammo to be able to use to get them to come back and finish it off and convert. And that's where the PR work, especially media, comes into play because you can say, hey, so and so, hope your week's going well. I thought you'd be interested in reading up this Wall Street Journal article that I got coverage in or had my comment placed in where I share my insights on XYZ and thought it'd be a good read for you. Would love to connect and talk about next steps, right? So it's providing value in that way while you're also building credibility with the prospect and then seeing it through. So that's just one way. But I think, again, it's really having that mindset of thinking past the placement and putting it to work on your own that you're going to start to really see some value.
And so thinking past the placement, what is your philosophy about how far past what are your channels? Do you have different ideas for different ways that you go to market when it comes to you have a Wall Street Journal ad versus a journalist who comes and does a video with a business? Kind of walk us through your different theories on where to go from there.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be at times the shelf life on the different placements that you secure. But what I found is that you can always find a way to call back to the work that you've done. So even if you're talking about something that's a year old, 2 years old, whatever it might be, there could be a way to weave it into the messaging that you're putting together for an outbound sales campaign or a warm lead that you're just trying to continue to have that conversation with. And so, I think that's why having those systems in place are really important because you also don't want to lose track of that work so that you remember to call upon it at a certain point in time. Um, I think also, and we might get into this a little later in the conversation, it's looking at the different channels that you have at your disposal to make that content evergreen, whether it's a newsletter, social media campaign, using it for securing speaking opportunities, even whatever it might be. There's different ways in which you can continue to even use the logo of a media outlet that you've secured interest with to be able to get new opportunities. So I think it's just evaluating what's in the mix in your content mix and then putting it forward from there.
And you work with a lot of different industries, a lot of different styles of business. And what I maybe want to learn from you and for the leaders, for the marketing strategists who are listening to the podcast, who maybe look at placement and especially for like Wall Street Journal or for these different avenues that are more traditional and maybe their feel but not so much in their execution. They might say, well, what's the worth of that versus the digital marketing campaigns or other organic channels. Walk me through how you help your customers understand what the value is of professional PR work that drives their business.
There's a couple of ways that I do it. One of which is to be transparent and upfront to say, hey, you could do this on your own technically, right? Like you could go and get a media contact database, whip up an email that you blast out to 1,000 reporters and cross your fingers that you're going to get something. And that, when you do get something, you're going to actually handle that opportunity the right way. Because when you're talking to reporters, there's a lot of missteps that you can make that can damage your business. So I'm always kind of like, you can try it yourself if that's an option for you and that's what you're thinking, but there's a really big downside to going that route. So that's number one. Number two is having the same kind of conversation that we're having today, which is if business development is a big part of what they're doing, is having that conversation to be like, we're going to be there to hold your hand as much as you need us to build that business development machine for you to leverage the work that we're doing. Because I think what we find with prospects often is that they have touched PR in some way, shape, or form before, and they haven't really seen that come to fruition. So it goes back to the original issue that I flagged earlier, which is that they often get the placement and nothing happens to their business. And it's like, no, we need to figure out what your content mix looks like right now and help you to push you forward to leverage it to the best of your ability and put our work into that and incorporate what we're doing into what you're doing for biz dev on a daily basis. So I think as long as we show them the path forward for that and really connect the dots in terms of how our work is going to support, not guarantee, but support the bottom line, that usually you're able to convert as long as they feel like you're the right fit overall.
And with what you do requires an immense amount of emotional control, emotional intelligence, and one of your superpowers is building trust. That's one of the things that you know you are. And you know this better than I do because it's you. You're the one who is helping businesses understand a kind of not necessarily rocket science, but a complex strategy that affects every part of their business, whether that's marketing, whether that's sales, whether that's operations, credibility, notoriety. How do you go about really developing a relationship with your customers that sales professionals need to understand first and foremost?
I think you really have to understand, to your point, emotional intelligence, what makes your clients tick, especially if you're in the service profession, where you have to understand the nuances of how they work because sometimes it's not about being helpful, it's about being understanding and knowing that being overly helpful actually works against you.
Mm,
So for example, you might think that having weekly update calls with your clients is showing that, hey, I'm committed, I want to be here to help, and I want us to be in tune and in sync as much as we possibly can. But they might look at that as a burden and be like, I don't want to talk to you every week, maybe every other week, maybe once a month, but I don't have time to do every week, right? Or maybe it's, hey, like I'm getting a billion emails a day, so like you don't have to write me every day with an update. Just give me an end of week update on where we stand. Obviously, communicate with me if we've got a media opportunity in progress, for example, or there's an update on a speaker submission, let's say. But beyond that, I don't want to have another email in my inbox that isn't necessary. Whereas you might think over communication would be really helpful. So I think it's again understanding the nuances of how the client works that helps you to keep that relationship long term. Because at the end of the day, if you're being productive and you're not being seen as an annoyance, that goes a long way towards them keeping you.
I think that's a really fundamental tip that's hard for a lot of sales professional sales teams and leaders to understand because we want to serve. I mean, a lot of people in what we do are here to serve other businesses and help their customers win. Like that's ultimately the goal. But we get over eager, and eagerness is something that, I'm a young sales professional. I always deal with this where I want to jump on everything, and I think it looks a little annoying. Like, oh, we have to meet every single week. That's a crazy amount of time. I'm an executive. I don't have an hour a week to give
Right.
to Jeb Blount Jr. because of the sales training that we're doing. You must have learned this. Do you have a story behind learning, the fine line between like annoyance and overburdening with communication to building a trust level that says, "Hey, I'm doing the work. You don't need to check on me because I'm going to tell you when it's done," and they believe you.
I don't have a particular story, but what I can say is that earlier in my career, I thought that picking up the phone and calling a client to talk about almost everything was the right way to go because I would, and I'm still kind of that way where I personally hate communicating over email. I'd rather just talk to you and figure it out. But this was earlier in my career, and what I realized, and it's still hard for me to do today because I am more of a phone person and like I just want to solve the issue and get it over with and off my plate. So it's more of a me problem. But what I found out very early on in my career was like that's not actually the way you're supposed to do it because as much as you think you're being helpful, it's just them having to get on the phone. And that was several years ago. Now we're in 2024 where everything is text, everything is email, and calls of any kind are seen as an annoyance. So I've I learned that fairly quickly, and ever since then, I've really tried to dial the calls back and make it so that it's as painless of a process as possible. But I absolutely will pick up the phone if I feel like it's something that needs to be talked about in real time. And another minor but important thing that I learned early on was I would sometimes send emails and the subject line would be all caps because I was like, oh, I want to make sure they see this and know it's important. I learned very quickly not everything is important, and putting an email subject line in caps can actually be off-putting. So yeah, those were two key learnings that I've definitely taken with me more recently.
I love it. I mean, I'm learning that as well. It's something that I work on, and so as a sales professional or leader, helping your team understanding, there is a professional way to go about communication that doesn't it doesn't impose on the customer themselves. And this is a follow up question for you is. You work in an industry where your customers are so important to the work that you're actually doing in the business. Like you have to pick the right customers to work with, which means that you're qualifying your potential customers heavily, I imagine, before they even get into a real sales conversation, because you have to make sure it's worth it for you and your team to jump into the rabbit hole of their business. So walk me through how you go about qualifying, and how you've learned to qualify your prospects so that you're spending time with people who are going to impact your business in a positive way.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there with the last part about making sure they impact us positively, because I think our process here is that unless a client, their budget is incredibly low, like obscenely low, and they just don't know any better to even say a number, we're willing to take them on if we feel like it's going to benefit us in the long term. And that might mean growing the budget over time. That might mean using them as a case study, or in an industry that we don't already have a case study in, or having them refer us to bigger clients that can afford our normal rates. Um, we assess things like that because I think our rule of thumb is we don't want to turn any business away unless we absolutely have to, because you never know where that business is going to lead. It's not to say we take on everybody off the street, but I think we're definitely a little bit more flexible than, the billion-dollar PR firm that's out there that wouldn't take someone on that's a bit smaller. So I think we're a little bit more flexible in that way, but we just want to make sure that from a long-term perspective, we get some kind of value out of it.
And since you're in a service, a business service, when you think about the process of the sale, of getting them
Mhm.
from the top of the funnel to their client working with you, and you're going to go start meeting with them and delivering on your services, what is an appropriate rule of thumb for running that process? Is it 5 meetings? Is it 7 meetings? How do you go about thinking as a business leader what the timetable should look like before you say, you know what, this is something I got to take out of the pipeline. This isn't real.
Yeah. It's a really good question that we're actually wrestling with right now. I think that I probably let things go a little too long because you never know, right? I don't think there's ever a situation where we totally take a prospect out of the running. It's more so just where we want to spend our time on that prospect. And you're kind of onto something where it's like one component of it is, well, how much time has gone by and they haven't responded or they haven't carried this over the finish line. That also depends on timing, right? Because we have a couple of prospects right now that would be larger accounts for us where we just want to get it signed. But I think part of the problem is we're heading into the end of the year. It's hard to get people to commit. And so that's an example of where it's like we don't want to drop them because it's probably just they are dealing with end of year stuff that makes it harder for them to just get a deal closed. But yeah, I think it's also taking a look at how the interactions are going. So if we feel that there's a natural back and forth and they're investing time the way that we would like into making the deal happen, then we definitely want to continue to try to see it forward with the understanding that perhaps in the first few meetings we were putting all of our effort into it and now maybe we dial back and follow up every other week, right? So I think your clients naturally or prospects naturally lead you that way as well, where things seem really good, but then they taper off a little bit naturally. They're not getting the answers that they want in time. And then you kind of mutually understand that maybe we need to follow up in 3 weeks instead of a week. Right. So, yeah, I think it's looking at the amount of time that's elapsed, how valuable it would be to get the client. Um, and also just, from a proactivity perspective, whether you're being annoying by following up too much because you know that they're not going to have an answer, but you're trying to push anyway. So there's definitely a bunch of different factors there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in that process, and as you're going through going working things through the pipeline, you're getting to the end of the year. It's the holiday season. How do you and your team handle objections? Because I imagine you get really hard ones, and a lot of them a lot of the time.
So most of our objections more recently haven't been hard nosed. They've been later on, I would say, which is pretty common for us. We've never really been in a situation where we've gotten a pass because a client's gone to another firm. I mean, it's definitely happened over the course of almost 6 years for sure. But I would say it's more not right now.
Hmm.
We thought we would have the budget, but we're going to get it in a few months, follow up then, or just something that is out of our control that kicks the can down the road. So I would say that's probably more of where we see objections. And when we're in that case, we try to be sympathetic to the situation, but I also try to instill some kind of urgency to say, hey, look, we understand we didn't have, let's say, the max budget of what we wanted. Could we take a portion of that to do something now? that builds up to next year, let's say.
Mm.
Um, we'll see if that works this year, but it's helped in the past. So I think it's just trying to assess, just kind of where we stand with the prospect and if it's realistic to ask for something minimal and then working up to something bigger, I'd say.
Absolutely. And that's a strategy that, I've used in the past, and it's helped win deals. It's helped, win parts of deals, which is, winning some is better than winning nothing at all.
Right.
And maybe it doesn't turn into something else, but you've served a customer well with the budget they have. You say, hey, what's the easiest route into helping you today? Your budget
Right.
isn't where you wanted it to be. Your timing isn't where you wanted it to be. We offer X, Y, and Z, and here's my recommendation. Is this something that we can get, through this year? So at least you've got something that's helping push your business forward and creating some urgency on that as well. Justin, a question for you: is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't about what you do for the market and at PR73?
No, I think you covered it very nicely. I would just say if the listeners want to learn more, they can visit us at pr73.com. They could also email me directly at justin@pr73.com or email the firm at info@pr73.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn as well.
And who should reach out to you just to make it even better? Who if they're listening in this audience, who should be reaching out to you?
Yeah, so we work with different types of ICPs, from public relations directors to marketing directors to CMOs, chief communication officers. So from an ICP perspective, or if you happen to be a marketing or PR agency that we can collaborate with, we work with them as well. But I would say our core verticals range anywhere from B2B, B2C, public affairs, real estate, areas like that. But we're more general. So I would say if you have an interest in PR, especially, integrating it into your business development efforts, reach out and we normally can find a way to make something work.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the Sales Gravy podcast. Go follow Justin Goldstein. It's PR73. So if you find him on LinkedIn, he's there. Their website is pr73.com. They've got some amazing work. They do awesome stuff. So definitely go give them a follow, and Justin a follow as well, because he posts great videos. So if you're looking for sales tips, it's not exactly sales, but it's sales. And I love watching his stuff on LinkedIn. So go follow them. Thank you for joining us on the Sales Gravy podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for watching this video. Please make sure to click like and subscribe so you never miss a single video. And if you want more sales training content, go to learn.salesgravy.com.